So, hey, I'm Shawn. This is my, my title sort of reflects, I don't know, my ambivalence about, not ambivalence about technology, but my caution about technology generally and using technology in the classroom. And also, frankly, just the, I've talked with John and Chad about this both. Oftentimes, the very binary conversations that we have about technology and especially social media. I find that social media, people will say, I love it, it's awesome, you know, it'll help, you know, save the world, or people will say, I hate it, it's stupid, I would never do that, it's evil, it's the end of civilization. And I tend to find myself, as in most things, more moderate and kind of in the middle. So I'm not gonna come here and, you know, I'm not a paid spokesman for Twitter, and Twitter is not I'm supposed to say that it's not supported. Is it supported?
Do not support Twitter.
Okay, so keep that in mind.
But people use it, so.
Okay, and I actually have to share a story with you first, and I'll circle back to this stuff, and it'll all make sense. So this is the last week of class, and I had my last class yesterday in a course that I teach in integrated liberal studies called Remix and Appropriation in the Western Tradition. And Remix is a course about sampling, borrowing, and copying in music, art, literature, architecture, you name it, and the sort of the creative act that is using someone else's work to create something on your own. And we talk about intellectual property and implications for capitalism and all this cool stuff. And my students had to do a presentation about their final projects, and their final projects were to create their own sort of remix that reflected some significant autobiographical fact or event about themselves. Then they were great, and the last guy got up, and his presentation involved a video in which he had repurposed, it sounds crazy, but it was great, scenes from Naruto. Does anybody know what Naruto is? The manga TV show. He repurposed scenes from this essentially cartoon, and the audio was a spoken word track that he had created. This guy's a student in the First Wave program here on campus. And it was amazing. This thing that he did was totally incredible. And I didn't cry, but I did not cry either. You know, I felt that tingling in my nose, and I was totally transfixed. And I thought, oh my God, everybody's looking at me, and there's in there professors crying, there's gonna be this big thing. And then he finished, and I looked around, and everybody, they were passing around tissues, and everybody, it was just this like incredibly emotional moment. His piece had been, he had just been very vulnerable and talked about all these struggles that he had had as a student. He had dropped out, he had battled depression, he had been so open. He had rendered it really well, and it was just the fact that he had opened himself to the rest of us was just this great moment. And I reflected on that, and I thought, well, this is kind of cool. You know, he used all this technology. There was a video, there had been audio that had been synced with it. The track itself had involved some sophisticated kind of looping, and he had dubbed himself and had sampled tracks within his audio. And I thought, that's great technology, awesome. And then I thought, well, yeah, but it's just sort of a means to an end, right? And he used that technology, and we had used technology throughout the semester, throughout 16 weeks, throughout 32 sessions, to build a community and to come together and to understand and respect one another, so that on May 7th, he would feel like he could do that. You know, it's not something that we could have done on January 21st. And so when I talk about Twitter and any of this stuff, I see it as in service to moments like that. And I don't want to be one of those people who says, that's what happens in my classes. We emote and cry and hug each other. But it was a kind of once in every couple of years sort of experience. So I teach in ILS, and I work for the Division of Diversity, Equity, and Educational Achievement. And the DDEEA is comprised of the People program, the Posse program, the First Wave program, and CO, the Center for Educational Opportunity, which serves low-income and first-generation college students. My job is to sort of come up with high-impact learning practices for students in the division. And I work with ILS to do that because what better place to find a home than ILS. I don't know if you've ever seen this plaque on Bascom. It talks about the history of the experimental college, which is the forebear of ILS from 1927 to 1932. I don't know if you can read that or not. It says, students took no tests and received no grades, but instead participated in discussions, plays, performances, and other activities that integrated learning into their daily lives, right? Alexander Meiklejohn, this was his pride and joy. Sounds great. So of course it was crushed within 5 years. We couldn't have that. But what we got was ILS. And ILS, the charge for the experimental college that sort of morphed into ILS, I went back, and if you, I don't know if any of you know Adam Nelson. Adam Nelson knows this stuff better than anybody, so I'm a poor person's Adam Nelson when I talk about these things. But the charge from Letters and Science when the ex-college was created was the purpose of the new college would to formulate and to test under experimental conditions suggestions for the improvement of methods of teaching, the content of study, and the determining conditions of undergraduate liberal education. So this is right down my alley, right? I feel like I'm working with students who are historically underrepresented on our campus, who really need high impact learning practices, quite seriously. And then I'm pairing that with this kind of experimental, innovative program in Letters and Science. So I teach 2 classes. I mentioned Remix and Appropriation in the Western Tradition. I teach this other course called Narratives of Justice and Equality in Multicultural America. Everybody just calls that first course the Wire course. And I've had people come up to me on the street and say, "Oh, you're that guy who teaches that course about The Wire." Yeah, not in the timetable that way, but that's what everybody calls it. The Wire, we use The Wire. The Wire was this award-winning drama aired on HBO for 5 years, created by David Simon. Ostensibly, it's about drugs and criminal justice and kind of life on the street in Baltimore. It's about many other things as well. That's kind of our core text. We use The Wire to kind of spin off many other conversations about criminal justice, about public policy, about race, about gender, many other things. In teaching that class and in working with my students generally, like one of the things I foreground is just the idea of conversation, right? And we're having conversations with the texts themselves. They're having conversations with one another. I'm having conversations with them. This might come as a shock to you, but there aren't a lot of like bald, middle-aged white guys in the classes that I teach, right? I am very much the outlier in my classes. I've taught classes where I'm the only white person in the room. And that's very interesting and very challenging, and it's a very good thing to have happen. But it makes I'm very cognizant of the fact that my students think that I'm out of touch, that they don't necessarily think that I'm charming and awesome. It's a challenge. So I think about what are some ways that I can sort of facilitate communication, not only between my students and me, but among their peers and with people outside of class as well. The more ways we can do that, I think the better off we're going to be. So, there's email, LMS, so just like Learn at UW, chat tools, old-fashioned writing comments on paper, and social media. And social media, to me, it offers some advantages in terms of immediacy and just offering synchronous communication with students. And this is like the least, I don't even need to tell you this, right? Like, newsflash, lots of people use social media. These are just statistics for everybody online. In 2014, younger people, the percentage who regularly use social media is much, much greater. Twitter is the least used among these four. I use Facebook. This is just my for my remix class. Here's our Facebook page. We sort of dump stuff in there. If I take pictures in class, we will share them there and so forth. I also use Spotify. I don't know if officially Spotify is a social media tool or not. It's sort of a music streaming service. My remix class, we use a lot of music. I need a place to access it and find it quickly. So can we listen to like Nirvana and okay, probably. I'll move on. At some point, when I've been teaching for a long time. I've been teaching since 1989, and at some point it dawned on me that perhaps I could try to use Twitter in some way. And Twitter is, online social networking service, short bursts, right? Nothing extensive, 140 characters, sort of no way of getting around it. So most of you, I won't bore you with this. So one gets a Twitter account. This is what your homepage will look like. So you'll have a little bio. This is, you have to kind of try to look smart and say clever things about yourself, right? Essentially, you can tweet at people. Those people who choose to follow you will get your tweets, and then you will get tweets from people who you were following as well. What is somewhat cumbersome about that, in terms of your followers, is these are people are tweeting now, right? And I can search for them, right? To see new tweets, one must click on. And as maybe the first semester I started using Twitter in the classroom, I was figuring out ways to have conversations, and I found myself doing this over and over. And one of my students said, hey, dude, there's this thing called TweetDeck that will make this much easier. TweetDeck is a tool, you'll see this, right? So it's dripping down, right? It's refreshing automatically. So these are, I've just picked a couple of hashtags. So we have a hashtag for our class, okay, Wire 275 with that little numeral sign in it. All of our tweets will appear in that column, right? And there are multiple other, and many other hashtags along the way. And I'll show you how one of the ways we use it, and what is the problem that this is solving? For me, I was concerned with sort of bottlenecks in conversation, bottlenecks in discussion, not only in class, but outside of class. Time and time again, multiple students will raise their hands, and not everybody can speak at once, right? So the moment passes, you forget what you're gonna say, someone else says what you were going to say, or you just become frustrated and your mind drifts. Or you're reading a text on Tuesday night and class isn't until Thursday, and you say to yourself, I'm definitely gonna mention this in class on Thursday, and then you sort of forget about it. So I wanted to figure out a way where we could just have more, better, faster conversations. So I'll show you how it works in class while we're watching The Wire. So we watch this show in class, okay? And if you've ever shown video in class, it's in many ways it could be just a passive thing. Students are sitting there not necessarily doing anything, maybe taking notes. I didn't want that to happen. I thought, how is a way that I can show an interesting text but not have students just sit there? How can I do that? We can't talk over it, right? That's not gonna work. By the way, so this is my class in Sterling Hall, and John was mentioning this too. So we have multiple pods. with screens as well. All right, so I'm going to allegedly do what I do. So I'm not going to use our actual hashtag because no one is tweeting, right? No one in that class is currently sending any tweets. So I'm going to use this Baltimore hashtag, but just sort of pretend. I think you'll get the idea. So on the screen, we will have these things together. Okay? I'll minimize, I'll smush this together, and then I'll show the video here. So in the back, so Chad, if you're saying to yourself, man, I can't really read those tweets, it's pretty small. You're in a pod though, so your screen is right there at the window. I'm not gonna.
Boy's name is what?
I'm not gonna play the audio for fear of offending your tender sensibilities in terms of the language. But so this is basically what happens. So just imagine these are all students in our class, and we're having a conversation there. Okay, we're having a conversation while watching this, and it's interesting to experience, right? Because your eye can only focus on one of two things. Oftentimes, there are many, many tweets sort of simultaneously or in a row, right? So the scroll will really be scrolling kind of quickly. It's not, people aren't tweeting that much about Baltimore right now. But you get the idea, right? We can watch, we can talk to one another in a way that we couldn't do ordinarily. And this text, right, I picked this text because I knew that it was provocative. I knew that students would find it engaging. I knew that they would like it. And I knew that they don't really get stuff like this in other classes. So it's not just some random text. I don't know if this would work if I showed, I don't know, a speech by Tammy Baldwin, let's say. I'm not sure it would work quite as well. So I'm very intentional about how I pick the text. So students tweet, this is one of the ways that we do it. Students will also tweet whenever they so choose. So if it's Saturday afternoon and you're walking down the street and you have a conversation with one of your friends about an issue that relates to our class, you can tweet in our hashtag, and there it will be. So things that I like about this, things that I think are significant. I don't discount coolness. Every semester, students are just sort of profoundly amazed that we could do something, use a technology that was invented like in the last 15 or 20 years. It sort of blows their mind that I'm not using chalk. That's important. I want to grab students, I want to engage them. I'm going to use that to do other stuff. It's not going to be all fun and games, right? I'm going to grab that interest, and we're going to do plenty of other substantive stuff, writing papers, taking exams, doing projects, and so forth. The quickness, obviously, you have a thought and you can share it instantaneously, as fast as it sort of enters your head. That's also a weakness. You can have multiple conversations. So John and I can be watching. John can make a comment about, I think McNulty is, the world's worst policeman. I can have a conversation with John. Other people could have separate conversations as well. People from outside our class can also enter into the conversation.
The conversations mean direct messages back and forth so that it's just between you and I, not open to the public.
Either or.
Or both. Okay.
Or both. I want people to have them in public so that other people can join in. If you say something interesting, other people can respond to it. an open hashtag, and this is something unexpected that happened when I started using it. At first it was just people in the class, but John has followers outside of class, so when he tweets, they see. So we'll get tweets from other people who aren't part of class, and the first time it happened, I was completely freaked out. I thought, oh my God, these people are invading our space. What will we do? And then I realized it was great, right? We have tweeted at actors in the show, and we have had conversations via Twitter with people who are actors in The Wire, which is pretty amazing. Irreverence, both good and bad. You can imagine, right? You're in a class with 30-some undergraduates. They're watching this provocative show. Sometimes they say things that are just not things that you would normally say. I like that and I don't like that. I want students to be informal. I want them to feel like they can say what's on their mind, but there is a point at which they shouldn't say things. Archiving, things will stay in our hashtag for a while, not forever. So if we want to go back, I'm not teaching this course this semester, that's why all these tweets are for me. If you're looking at this and saying, Shawn, what's going on? You're just tweeting to yourself. It's because I'm not teaching it this semester. But I still tweet. So we can just go back and they will stay there. They don't stay forever, so the archiving, you can use a separate platform to do that as well. Expanded community and weirdness, interesting things happen, okay? Unexpected things happen. There are several cliffhangers in The Wire, including an episode where one of the main characters gets shot. And there's some question as to whether this character is going to live, and one episode ends with her life in the balance. So we're getting ready to watch the next episode. And I had it teed up, like so. And I was talking like I'm talking now. I'm wagging my finger. And students started laughing, and I was like, what? Why are you laughing? And I looked, and somebody had tweeted, hey, Shawn, get on with the show. We want to find out what happened to Kima. And I thought, that's great. And it was perfect. It wasn't a vicious thing. It wasn't a hostile thing. It was meant in a spirit of goodwill. And I was like, okay. Other things happened I never thought of. Students who are running late, I've had this happen multiple times. We'll get tweets from somebody who will say, I'm going to be there, I missed my bus, I'll be there in 5 minutes. And it's not a substantive thing necessarily, but often it's just a community building thing. They get to know one another that way. Okay, so for things that I didn't like. So it's not, again, I'm immediately suspicious of anybody who has a pedagogical panacea, and I'm not here to sell that to you. Tweets are only 140 characters, right? So what can you say in 140 characters? Oftentimes, not much, nothing of substance. It lends itself to that short sentence or two length quip, which always isn't substantive. It can be too quick. You can respond too fast without thinking. You can say things and release them into the universe without having paused and thought about them. The novelty kind of wears off. Students at the beginning of the semester often will think this is the greatest thing that's ever happened to them, and then you get to May and there will be 3 tweets. Access, I make students get Twitter accounts. I make them do it. I don't want to coerce them into doing it. Sometimes students, they won't bring a device with them to class. Most of them do. One of the reasons I use this is because I saw students were coming in and they were on their devices, right? And I said, okay, let's do something with this thing that you're already doing, rather than me grumbling and wagging my finger about how terrible it is. Let's just, if it's something that engages you, let's just use it to a purpose. The tweeting, it can, it's not always, the duration of it doesn't always last. And finally, just follow up. The tweets kind of come and go, right? Our hashtag is not quite like this one flying along, right? But and John will get to this, right? There are ways to archive and save, but sometimes interesting things come and go rather quickly. So there can be a kind of lack of permanence.